Yes. There, that's absolutely.
We gotta take notes, there's gonna be a quiz.
Ladies and gentlemen, there will be a quiz at the end, so make sure you have your paper and pen. This is going to be about the rate that I talk at. I will talk a little bit too fast at points, so if you want to remind me to slow down. Also, this is as loud as I'm going to talk, so if it's too quiet for you, you got to come forward. My name is Adam Fletcher Sasse, and for the next hour, I'm going to make jokes about schools in Omaha. Yeah! It's gonna be hard. It's uphill the whole time. Now, in this room today, there are a lot of truth tellers. There are people here who have lived experience, both as students, as parents, as community members, and even as teachers. Apparently, there's some old administrators in the room right now. So I'm really gonna make a bunch of stuff up. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be fun. For the last 15 years, I've been working to document the history of the neighborhood, of the whole community, from Dodge Street all the way to Washington County line, from 72nd all the way to the river. And I really don't care about anything else beyond those boundaries. But here, let me tell you why, not just because I'm facetious. Back in 2007, the beginning of Wikipedia, it was ridiculous. It was like the Wild West out there. I got onto the internet and I looked up the history of Omaha and there was nothing out there. So I got onto Wikipedia and I started seeing all these articles about Chicago's history. Chicago this and Chicago that, and apparently Chicago had it all. And I thought to myself, hey, wait a second. If Chicago can do that, I can do that for Omaha, no big deal. So on Wikipedia, I started just over 300 articles related to the history of Omaha, Nebraska. And I did that by reading every book about Omaha's history that I could find. People, places, events, the whole 9 yards. But I kept bumping into this thing. I grew up over at 27th and Ellison in the 80s and 90s. I graduated from North in 93. And from that place, I was interested in North Omaha's history. I had grown up with people who told me over and over. There was a ton of it. Betty and Dwayne Phillips told me about the streetcars that ran all the way up to 24th and 4th. So you could go and watch the movies at the Alamo Theater. Von Trimble told me about the segregation in the Coons Place neighborhood and how his family broke in and were able to buy a house right there and get up into the neighborhood. And I looked for that in Omaha history books and it wasn't there. And I looked for that online and it wasn't there. So I tried to write it on Wikipedia and apparently they didn't have any room for that. They're like, well, it's got to be notable and that's not notable. So I decided to make it notable. Because that's all I had ever heard was that North Omaha mattered. Well, all right, come on, we've all heard the same thing. We heard a lot from the media that North Omaha didn't matter. We heard a lot from the politicians that North Omaha didn't matter. But I can tell you that from the 4 politicians that I've talked to in the last 48 hours, they are beginning to think that it might matter. We're working on it. $350 million is going to help it matter a little bit more pretty quick. But that said, since 2007, I started NorthOmahaHistory.com. And when I did that, I just let myself go wild. Nobody pays me to do this. This is my passion project. Since then, since 2012, I've written 650 articles on NorthOmahaHistory.com. I've developed an internet following of about 18,000 people who are on Facebook and Instagram watching the stuff. I've written 8 books related to North Omaha's history specifically. And then this next year, Bison Press is going to put out a history of African Americans in Nebraska that I co-wrote with Preston Love Jr. And I'm here today because I love this place. In a weird way, I live in Portland, Oregon, guys. I've been gone for 25 years. But this kind of flows through my veins. This is my people, you. So, happy to be here. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you to Pastor, thank you to Jill and your hosting here at Mount Olive. I do a quarterly series on Zoom for Mount Olive. So you can always tap into that if you haven't joined us on that before. If you have, welcome and thank you again for doing that. Yesterday, I got to see a few of you down at St. Therese, the old St. Therese Catholic Church in East Omaha. Today, it's the Church of Jesus Christ Whole Truth. Beautiful old building, built in 1927, right on Ogden, but off of 16th. So if you didn't know it was there, you'd never go to it. Big old plaster wall, still the same building that it was in 1927. Fascinating place. But I did the history of East Omaha. And one of the things that we know about our neighborhoods is that people don't tell the histories of these things. I looked all over, not just the internet, I talked to the people. Douglas County Historical Society, the old historian. Hey, did anybody ever really talk about the history of schools in North Omaha? It is nothing. So I'm gonna miss some things in the next 55 minutes. I'm gonna talk too fast. You will not be entirely satisfied by the end of this. However, I do make a point of talking about 50 schools, public schools in North Omaha, 25 private schools in North Omaha, and a couple other interesting factoids along the way. We're gonna dive in. So thank you all for coming. Ready, set, go. First, before we get started, let's play the Can You Name That Place? Oh, also, get ready for the colors. I was messing around. I decided I was gonna go colorful on this one. Does anybody recognize the name on that?
Ponca.
Ponca School. Anybody get this one? All right, we're gonna knock you out this time. Oh, that's blurry. Anyway, this is the old Sherman School. This is the 1888 Sherman School. That was at 16th and James. Not 14th and Ellison, 16th and James. This was the Fort Street School for Incorrigible Boys.
They closed it before I came up after.
We would have been classmates. Get into all those, you're gonna hear more. I wanted to start with a few splash, and some of the pictures turned out a little bit darker than I wanted. Does anybody recognize this facility? 3 buildings, but there's actually 7 on campus. Started in the Nebraska School for the Deaf. These are some of the old buildings. For our Lutherans in the house, what? St. Paul, ancient congregation. Lake School, this was, I think we can almost see it. It says, "We love you, Bob." It was the Bob Gibson homecoming parade after he got famous. Anybody recognize this? Druid Hills right there. This is the overpass over 30th Street. Please.
Where was St. Paul?
St. Paul was in a couple different places. The last place that they were in North Omaha.
No, the first place.
Well, I don't know the first place off the top of my head. He's gonna start with a stumper. St. Paul was down on 18th
It was
and
down where we were yesterday.
no, further south, way further south. And mind blowing, just a great deep history. I've got the article written up on NorthOmahaHistory.com, but can't focus on it too much. Today we're going to talk about 31 current public schools, 22 closed public schools, and we're going to mention 28 religious schools that I don't focus on very much. We're also going to get into some nitty gritty, but let's start here. Ladies and gentlemen, the history of schools in North Omaha starts before there was a North Omaha, before there was an Omaha. In 1846, at winter quarters, the Mormons had at least 3 different schools. You got to remember, there were 3,500 people camping there. It wasn't a camp. They had laid it out in a grid pattern with streets. They had 2 market squares, 1 town square, and at least three different public schools, and a select school. Anybody know what that phrase meant?
Talented and gifted.
For incorrigible boys.
Not yet. Not talented and gifted, not special. Select schools were private schools. So to think that in their own encampment, they had a private school in addition to the publics. So we can already see some stratification in North Omaha. It's like it kept happening. Anyway, I like the old pictures. All right. There it is. Nobody's ever made that list before, and it's a pain in the neck. I'm not going to focus on it too long, so if you want to take a picture or something, go for it.
Is this on your website? Okay.
Yeah, I've got a terrible article on my website on the history of schools in North Omaha. I've broken it down a couple different times, and now with the slideshow and all this collected, I'm going to put up a couple different things. But basically, what you're going to see here is a mention, hopefully, of every school that you think of. Does anybody not see a school on here that they want to? This is listed by the years that they opened. So you can see the first numbers, when the ones with 2 numbers, that means that they're closed. With the ones with 1 number, that's when they open. Does anybody not see a school that they want to?
This Blessed Sacrament up there?
This is just the public.
You have Force Man.
But I don't have King Science.
Yeah. What happened with that was King Primary.
Primary became King Middle.
became King Science Center. and then King Science Center, because I worked there. King Science Center moved from King Primary to Man, that's why it's King at Man.
It's deep. We're gonna get there in a minute. First middle school in Omaha, that's all I got.
Yeah.
Anybody recognize this?
Yeah, that was on Grant, wasn't it?
24th and Grand,
Grand.
2 blocks north of Ames. There was a town there. It was the town of Saratoga. It was founded in 1857 by some speculators from New York. The same speculators who founded the little town of, they backed the money behind Florence. They also started a town down here at 24th and Grand. Brownell was the name of an Episcopal bishop in New Hampshire who got the money to get this thing going. This was an old hotel. It was called the Grand Hotel at 24th and Grand. If you can picture the Lutheran Church of Our Redeemer, which was originally, anybody? Pearl Church, Methodist. This was built across the street. And when the hotel moved out, the school moved in, and they only stayed there for 3 days.
Days?
My phone is back. Uber tried to swallow it, but I wouldn't let him. That didn't distract me at all.
Your flashlight.
Because I was gonna blame him.
Do you need to charge it down?
No, thank you. The first public school in Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha was founded in 1854. It was formally established in 1856. And wait, it took how long to start their public school? 7 years. There were about 10,000 people in Omaha before they had a regular school going.
Wow.
A little slow. They took their time, and it was dirty, it was dusty. But there was a park in the original layout of Omaha, and that park was called Jefferson Square. In my time, we would have called it Jankety Park because they never really took care of it. You all might know it by its derogatory name. Anybody? Hobo Park.
Oh, yeah.
16th and Cass. It was down there until 1969.
Yeah.
Hands waving, heads bobbing, nodding. This was just a replica of the original school. Of course, it wasn't that small. It was a 4-room schoolhouse that they built right in the park. They tried more than 20 times to reuse that park for other purposes. The school was one of them. That school building was eventually moved in 1867, just 4 years after it opened. It was moved to become a different school, and we're gonna get there in just a minute.
What's that building in the background?
It's a simple building.
It's not now.
Any other guesses? Hotel Fontenelle? Any other guesses? Looks like the stores.
No.
Yeah, so Hotel Fontenelle had those spires
Yeah.
sticking up, but there was another building that was a lot closer to 16th and Cass that had spires sticking up on it. The post office, the old Omaha post office, and it had the same kind of spires as Fontenelle. So I don't know if it's one or the other. Mark says no, it was Hotel Fontenelle. I'm going with that. Oh, by the way, awkward. My 4th grade teacher who got me into history is here today, Jeff Koenig. Thank you. Can we say hi to Jeff? Hi, Jeff. My high school history teacher who keeps me honest is Mark Schultz, and he's here today. So,
Who's your keeper today?
yeah, I made it through all on my own. I love these buildings.
So do I.
This drives me crazy. The North Omaha School, later renamed the Izard Street School, was at 20th and Izard. Only from 1872 to 1893. Can you imagine? Let's tear it down. We don't need that ratty old building, and they thought it was old by the time it was done. Look at that.
21 years.
8 bedrooms, or 8 bedrooms, 8 rooms, classrooms. Sorry, 8 classrooms. It was packed the entire time it existed. We remember what happened to 20th and Izard, don't we? It became industrial. And by the 1890s, they were clearing the whole thing out and building it out for industry. Now, the church school stayed right there. Bonus points, anybody? What church by 20th and Izard? At 17th and Izard?
Holy Family.
Holy Family Catholic. And, yes, ma'am. And that neighborhood started as an Irish neighborhood in the 1850s, evolved into an Italian neighborhood, and then it became really mixed, including African Americans, and some of the first Black students at OPS attended the North Omaha School. That said, whoop, they took it out and they replaced it, but we'll get there in a minute. The first African American teacher in Omaha Public Schools taught at Dodge School. Dodge School was located at
11th and
11th and Dodge. And the first African-American teacher in Omaha was Lucy Gamble in 1896. Lucy Gamble became the wife of Reverend John Albert Williams, who was the minister at St. Philip Episcopal Church at 22nd and Nicholas. But his wife, she lost that identity as the first Black teacher, and they didn't celebrate it again in her lifetime until she was very old in her 70s. And then she got all kinds of props in that respect.
Very old in her 70s.
Now, question, why would they have had a Black teacher at Dodge Street School? Because Omaha schools have been very segregated all along. They had a Black teacher because, at 11th and Dodge, because the original Black neighborhood in Omaha was at 9th and Dodge.
Oh.
And that was called, all the way back in the 1870s, the near north side was at 9th and Dodge.
Oh.
Old schools. So we heard about Saratoga. The town of Saratoga started in 1857. Its first school that I found on record started in 1862. So the towns were slow to build up their schools, except for those Mormons, man. They just got right in there and public schooled it from the beginning. But Saratoga, this is their second building. It was right on the northeast corner of 24th and Ames, wood frame building, 8 classrooms. It was eventually torn down and replaced with this one. The third Saratoga school, again on the northeast corner of 24th and Ames. If you can picture it today, it's a big fenced in lot. There's a trucking company that's right there. There's an old grocery store that's still standing from the 1920s. Of course, the grocery store is closed, but the trucking company is still in that same building. This building started as Saratoga School, moved out in 24. In 27, Omaha University moved in and made it their science department. And this picture, when it's not fuzzy, says Municipal University of Omaha Science Hall. Oh wait, why would the University of Omaha have a science hall at 24th and Ames? Oh, we're gonna get there.
So both of those buildings are on 20.
24th and Ames on the northeast corner. But then the district built a new school. And it's the current old Saratoga School at 20, this says 24th and Meredith, that's where the lot ends, but it starts over at 25th and Meredith. And that building's still there. It is closed. It is no longer Saratoga School. It's being used as a special learning facility by a different name. But this is the 4th Saratoga School built in 1926. Old school. This is where it gets nerdy though.
Yeah.
I gotta get into the old maps. The old maps are fun. And they have weird things on them. And one of the things that I had to learn about were all these markings that said SD. SD5, SD29, SD21.
School districts.
So I laid it out for you all. And I gave it to you right here. And this is the first time that I've put together this slide before. Saratoga, we've talked about. So here's Florence. Down here's Omaha. Right here's Saratoga. This says Saratoga because this is the size of the township. The town of Saratoga went out to 42nd Street. All the way to the river. Now other things happened inside of that. And that township only existed proper until about the 1870s. But it was the town of Saratoga. They never incorporated. They never had a government. That's why we don't know about them today. But they had a school. Oh wait, another school over here. Well, that says SD 49 and that says Beechwood. Any Beechwood fans out there? Yesterday I got to meet some graduates of Beechwood Elementary School. And you might never know, it was down at 12th and 4th. I'm sorry, East 12th. And I'm sorry, North 12th East 4th Street. North 12th East Street, 4th Street. It was an intersection. Anyway, the point is way out. Down by, not only down by the lake, but also down by the airport. You might be familiar with a little controversy that's happening down there right now where they want to swallow up the land and make it into beautiful industry. Beautiful.
They're revitalizing.
There's a lot of growth going on today. But wait, what's this weird district way out here? Oh, I haven't found it. And there's no clear list that I can find yet. I need to get down to the archives and see if the library has it. But the point is, there are a couple unknown districts. 32 is the other one that I don't know about. I think it's Union. Ponca Hills. You can see on Ponca Creek where the creek went. There's a misunderstanding, and it's perpetuated today, There's a chili food, Ponca Hills, at the fire department this afternoon. Anybody going to that? People think that the fire department building was the school. It wasn't. The school was a wood-clad building. They tore it down to build the fire department. But people will tell you that that's a school. They also think that the school was on this side of the creek, but in actuality, it was on the other side across the road from Shipley Cemetery. Now, you have to be a Ponca nerd to know about that, but if you don't know about that, look up Shipley Cemetery. It's fascinating. Anyway, you get the rest of the schools that are going on here. School District 3, that says School District 2, oh wait, okay. Orientation, Saratoga, Beechwood. Right here, 38 is West Saratoga. You might know it as the Central Park neighborhood, 42nd and Grand. That school was opened in the 1870s. And it was called West Saratoga. Then they called it Cherry Hill. And eventually it became known as Central Park. The first Central Park school, they met in the basement of a church that was called the West Saratoga Congregational Church. The minister came from 24th and Ames, and he rode his horse out to 42nd and Grand. Oh, by the way, it wasn't called 42nd and Grand at that point. It was just, let's just go up Cherry Hill. Because it was all farms out there, and those farm kids need to go to their school. And then we got 29, and we got this one down here. Yes, that one. Oh, question mark 9, that's my unknown. And we have this little school district up here in fancy Florence. And yeah. Oh, by the way, just as a side note, look at the weird things the river does.
Yeah.
And is there a lake in East Omaha? Bonus points, you hadn't been there yesterday. I'm not talking about it. I stay focused. Pretty colors help. They really do. Sherman School,
Oh, wow.
1888.
What?
All these wood-clad buildings. Beechwood School. Ponca School. Now, wait a second. I gave away the name of the slide already. These were the country schools. That's why they look like this. They didn't build those big brick mammoth Victorian. Oh, they built wood-clad 2-room buildings. And that's all these are. That was a 1-room, 2 rooms, 2 rooms. They had grades 1 through 8 in each one of those buildings. At one point, this building was built for 50 students, 25 and 25. When they closed it in 1947, the neighborhood couldn't afford to keep it going because they had 150 students in that building, in the basement and upstairs. But we're going to get into that in a minute. Ooh, I can go down a rabbit hole. Spring Hill School out at 66 and Girard. Anybody familiar with the old name of that area? The town of?
Birch.
Nope.
No, not.
Close. It's at the beginning of that. That's how it's called. DeBolt.
Oh, no, really?
DeBolt. You might be familiar with the other installation, the other community institution out there called the Danish Springwell Cemetery. You see, the Danes, they had a little hold on the land out there. They couldn't decide, are we going to name it Spring Hill or are we going to name it Springwell? So they went one with the cemetery, one with the school. This was at the end of a farmer's field. There's still a school there today.
At 6600.
Mhm. Spring Hill School is still going right now. It's not that building.
Right,
It's
right.
one of those brick things. You see what I found for the old Florence School?
That's
That's
great.
because I could not find a picture of the original Florence School. So if you have one in your photo album, you need to send me a picture of it, please. I want that photo.
Where'd you get that one?
I just made it's a,
Oh, you
it's a
just
stolen thing from the internet. Yeah. That school opened up in 1872. OPS has this school is opening up in 1883. They don't know. Shoot. But the other thing I thought was interesting about Florence, their first school that I could find was called the Turner Select School. Remember what Select School meant?
Yeah.
Private. Opened up in 1856. Mr. Turner respectfully informed the citizens of Florence that he has opened a select school in said city and solicits their patronage and support. He taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. 3 years. But we would be remiss not to mention the reality of Omaha's public schools. You see, that segregation thing happened from the jump. And my graphic is now missing one thing that I know that nobody ever talks about. It's real. this is not an imagined thing. There's real numbers that are behind it all. What you see right here are 5 schools: Kellen School, Lake School, Kennedy School, Lothrop, and Long, that were the original segregated schools. That didn't mean that they only had black kids. It meant that's the only place that black kids were allowed to go to school. And that's not allowed as in, you may enter the room. It's allowed as in, you know where you're supposed to be and where you're not supposed to be. It was de facto segregation, not de jure segregation. It was Jim Crow. But here's where it really began, and the part that's missing from this. Right here. There's a picture that's going to end up there somehow. In 1867, so remember Nebraska Territory opened up for settlement what year? 1854, Nebraska opened up for settlement. And we saw earlier that OPS's first school opened up in 1863. There was a law on the books in the Nebraska Territory. It didn't become a state until 1867. There was a law on the books in 1863 that said black people don't have to pay taxes for schools because black people aren't allowed to go to schools in Nebraska. We're not talking the Deep South. We're talking about Nebraska. I don't know if that's an extension of the Deep South, but you get the idea. That existed until 1867, and they finally got their ducks in the row. And the school district was led by a guy whose name was, oh wait, here's his name right here, Mr. Howard Kennedy. He was the superintendent, the first superintendent. And he said to the schools, we don't have to have a school that we don't have to let black students into our schools. We're going to have a school just for them. And in 1867, he opened up the colored school downtown in Omaha. And it was a Jim Crow school that did not allow white students in and did not allow black students out. And that school existed for approximately 4 years. Because in 1871, a man named Edwin Overall was an early black politician in Omaha. He came here from Chicago. In Chicago, he was an Underground Railroad conductor and a recruiter for the Union Army during the Civil War. Remember, that ended in 1965. He comes to Omaha right after that. He tries to send his daughters to school. Oh, he's like, why did we have that? And he started protesting in 1867. It took him 4 years for his campaign to work. And in 1871, Omaha Public Schools closed the colored school and allowed African-American students to go into the general school population. But until that point, for those years, black students were strictly segregated. Now, the segregation went on, and that's what this story is about right here.
Because it followed the housing patterns.
It followed the housing patterns, but it also followed a couple other things that were at work underneath that fabric. But the point is, it went on and on and on. African-American teachers were not allowed to teach in white schools. Now, back then, right, that's it. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, does anybody remember Harry Burke when he was superintendent? Yeah, Harry Burke was quoted in the Omaha World Herald as saying a black principal will never lead a white school in Omaha. Of course, Catherine Fletcher proved him wrong, and she did it, and others, administrators and teachers, stepped out, and our schools are richer, better, thicker, and stronger than ever before because of it. But this is the reality that we sit with today. We are 25 years after the Supreme Court ended court-ordered integration, and now our schools are more segregated than they were when these photos were taken back in the old days.
That's a rabbit hole too, deseg.
But I don't want to miss the point. Regardless of being segregated, black schools were successful in Omaha, and they worked because black educators made them work and white allies worked with them. One of the strongest was Franklin School, built in 1895, demolished in 1980 and rebuilt. One of the strongest was Long School, built in 1895, became majority African-American, was assigned the first black principal in Omaha, who was Dr. Eugene Skinner. Did he get his doctorate?
Yeah.
I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah.
But Skinner, he had done all the work. He was a classroom teacher, he was a principal, and then became assistant superintendent and retired in 79. And so, oh yeah, and of course has a magnet school named for him today in that honor, but all the same, we're a little slow to recognize this. And it goes on. It goes on because the schools, again, they became integrated at a point, and one of the most integrated, one of the most beautiful school stories in Omaha is forgotten. And it belonged to this school right here. Huge. Cass School. So I mentioned that original school building for OPS, and we saw the little picture of the float that had the building going along in it. That was actually a 4-room building that was down in Jefferson Square. They moved it out of Jefferson Square and moved it over to 14th and Cass. And the original building that was here was a little wood frame building from the 1860s that sat all the way until the 1872 when they built this monster. So I went to Miller Park School. Does anybody have a picture of that in your mind? We're going to show it in a minute. But basically, same kind of frame. And what I learned, so I have a master's degree in educational leadership and policy studies. I worked for Washington State's education agency for several years, and I've done a lot of work in schools otherwise. And I had to learn about the structure of schools, not just physically, but the mental model that drives them. And the best way to envision this, at Miller Park School, you walk through the doors, and please correct me if I got this wrong, but except my brain remembers it. Walk through the doors, it was kindergarten over here. Then we had a library in the front, and there were some offices in the back, and it went back to the kindergarten, library, and then first grade, second grade, go upstairs, third grade, fourth grade. What does that look like when we make that long oval? Well, it looks like a conveyor belt, because this was a factory made to educate students most efficiently as possible. And that's no rip on a teacher or a principal or administrator. I love the work you do and I respect it, but the schools were built to be factory model schools where you get as many kids through with as few resources as possible.
Wow.
And we see that now and it's like, oh, that's terrible. Back then it was just like, hey, it works. We can do this cheap. 1 to 40, let's go for that. They have one teacher with 40 students. So Cass Street School succeeded in spite. These students down here, you can't see it very well, but there were African-American students in the student body. But there were more than 50 languages spoken at Cass Street School in 1878.
What?
There was a ton of immigrant folks. And they were Italians and Irish and all of those words, but they were also Eastern European. They were also, I mean, just tied up in all the thickness. There was all kinds of things going on. And it was a beautifully integrated school for a very long time. And I don't want to make it sound like it's some kind of wonderland because that neighborhood was rough. That was the Jefferson Square neighborhood. And there was so much just real adversity and diversity simultaneously. But here it was. This is what it looked like in action. Franklin School. It was demolished in 80 and rebuilt in 81. It looks like Wilford, it looks like Miller Park, it looks like Cass. Wait a second, we're seeing a pattern. It looks like Lake.
Yeah, they look like the same.
So lots of the architects were actually the same guys. MacDonald was one of the popular architects, but there were other ones. The Tensor had quite a few. John MacDonald. Anyway, they all just take the formula and just tweak it a little bit. But beautiful features, lots of cool things when you look at the building. This building became remarkable for a lot of reasons, not the least of which being in 1879 started out as a super integrated neighborhood. In 1919 became the beginning of white flight when white people ran away from the neighborhood. And then by the 1930s and 40s, it was a completely African-American student body. And in 75, they closed it. Mighty Rangers. Oh wait, apparently now it's the Lions or Simba, the whole thing. Yeah, I support it, whatever, that's cool. But you voted for the Rangers. That's what I got.
Do you remember
I
why?
don't remember a mascot.
Well, because I wanted it to be.
Why the Rangers?
No, I have no idea.
Now Miller was the Omaha's first park ranger.
Oh.
Oh, Dr. Miller. Should we go down that rabbit hole real quick? Because that would be fun.
They could ask me about them.
Thank you. So Dr. Miller, planting trees, go guy. We'll leave it there. But my classroom with Mr. Koenig was right down here in this corner. And that's crazy to me to see you all and have him here and the whole thing. So that's fun.
That is cool.
Belvedere. Anybody know the story of Belvedere? Belvedere had a different name and was located 3 blocks away from its current site. It was called Omaha View School. And it began in a 2-room schoolhouse that was originally located in East Omaha
Oh.
called Beechwood.
Oh.
And they moved it up the hill and plopped it down at the top of the hill and called it its own school. Before that, the kids were bused from there over to Omaha View, which became Howard Kennedy. long bus ride. And by bus, I mean it was a horse-drawn carriage with the windows on the back. Okay, Girls Inc. today, 45th Street was originally Clifton Hill School. And we noticed, oh wait, it's that same rectangle factory model.
That's so.
Goes on and on. There were a couple that popped out. Maybe they were a little bit different. They had different elements. They had different features. Monmouth Park.
My mom went there.
What became of Monmouth Park? Does anybody remember?
Is it apartments now?
No.
Not now. It was for a minute. It was for a minute. Located at 33rd and Ames. And it had its own little overpass. They tore it down after a tornado, a windstorm ripped the roof off. It was like 80, 84, 86, somewhere in there. I don't remember the number. But the original Monmouth Park was just that building. And then they added a wing here and they added a wing there. Does anybody know what these tubes are?
Fire escapes.
Fire escapes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, that was about. that.
Fire escapes.
It was a
Yep.
guess.
Yep.
See what that picture
Yep.
is.
The whole thing was there's a fire on the first floor. Jump in the tube and slide out. Well, I still have a fantasy of having a tube on the side of my house because that'd be cool.
I wanna go for a fire drill and use it.
Yeah.
This is Florence School, at least number 2, probably number 3. Again, if you could find me pictures of number 1 and 2, that'd be great. Nobody has them as far as I know, but I think some people might be sitting on them. But number 3 was at 31st and Willett. You can still, what can you still see from the old school today? Go.
Steps.
You can see the steps right here.
Seriously?
Yep, they're still there. They're in front of an apartment building on the corner. Yeah. But there
When
you
was
go.
it torn down?
This was torn down in 64. Replaced a couple blocks up the street. Some people really believe that they replaced the building so it could be closer to their house. 2 blocks away. I don't know. You guys
Are those people?
Yes.
No names. No names. The 4th Street Special School for Incorrigible Boys. The year was 1914. It was nitty-gritty in North Omaha. It's funny, the Miller Park neighborhood was really a suburban dreamland when it was built. Folks really thought that they were out there in the suburbs. You took a streetcar from downtown. Miller Park was built, it was working class. Nobody had a lot of money, but it was cool. It was okay. There was a corner of the neighborhood that was called the Belle Isle Edition that was built in 1910 by a man named Charles Martin, who went on to construct Minaloosa and Florence Field. He used Belle Isle as his test to see if it worked. There you go. There it is. I just gave you that story.
20 years old.
Yes, it is. However, suburbs had problems sometimes. And apparently incorrigible boys were one of those problems. They built a school for the kids who had dropped out. This is an integrated school. Half of the students that I can count, there's like 3 or 4 different pictures from the interior, and half of the students roughly come out as looking to be people of color. So that's my assumption, and it could be wrong, but it looked integrated. This school existed only for 3 years.
Wow.
They had fancy things on the inside of these 2 buildings. A printing press, a glassworks, steel working shop. Sounds like what?
Trade school.
1914. There was a little man who was in education at that point. His name was John Dewey. And John Dewey was out in America promoting this idea of democracy through education. And the way that we got to do that is not just by teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, because for some students that would never work. He wanted hands-on learning for all learners. Omaha responded and did it. Now, it turned out they found out the demand for this was kind of high. So they went ahead and built a major school to replace this. Go ahead.
Tech high.
Now, here's a little bonus point. This is fun. I know this. That guy was preceded by another school. Thank you. Gosh, just pull the. School was the predecessor to Tech, and 4th Street Special School for Incorrigible Boys was a predecessor to Tech. Tech became the largest high school west of the Mississippi River as soon as it was built.
Wow.
The largest physical plant. And a phenomenal building. If you don't know about the depth and breadth of Tech High School, the presentation could be on Tech alone. We do have teachers in this room who taught at Tech. Mark, raise your hand. So ask him later. Oh, 2. Oh, we're 2. Thank you, Gary.
Commerce also was pulled, the business department was pulled from Central High, and it was originally 4 or 5 buildings on Leavenworth, which is now where the county jail is.
Oh, wow.
Coincidence? Now, for all of you local neighborhood folks, do I have any Middle-Easterners hiding around? A couple? Good, good. You wouldn't recognize this building. Oh, wait, I'll just hold this in your imagination. We'll get there in just a minute. Okay, now's the minute. Look at that building up there in the background of the original Middle-Eastern School. That's what Middle-Eastern School looked like when it was built. Look at that building. Now look at this building. Look at that building. Look at this building. They moved half of it from this site up to Middle-Eastern to be the original Middle-Eastern School in 1916. It lasted for 6 months, and then they started building the brick building. And they kept building the brick building. And they added 4 times to Middle-Eastern School. And go Middle-Eastern. Love and respect for Fairfax.
Yes.
Fairfax School is located over at 40th and Pratt. Now, the interesting thing about a lot of these schools, they're located on a big street or right next to a big street, a block off. Miller Park's 2 blocks off of 30th. Well, even Kennedy's right on 30th, on and on and on. Fairfax School was not. Fairfax School was a 2-room schoolhouse that was built in the middle of North Omaha, in the middle of a residential neighborhood in 1911. Teeny tiny little building. They eventually used all the basement and the upstairs, but they shut it down in 74. And they sent the kids to Druid Hill and Monmouth Park and whatever else was right around.
But
at
they
that
still
point.
used it through 74?
Yes.
And then in 74, they blasted it down as soon as they closed the school for the year.
Adam, could that be the missing school that you,
No.
it isn't?
Well, I mean, there's no indication because that map is a lot older than this building, but maybe, I don't, that's a good question, Mark. I gotta dig that now. Rabbit holes, yeah. Now, interesting thing, if you go drive over at 40th and Pratt, you'll see that there is an old grocery store right there. That's a church. But 40th and Pratt looked like it could have emerged as a commercial intersection someday, but it never did. So that's just a little thought. The ways that neighborhoods develop. We could trace North Omaha's neighborhood development through these schools. Because it's all tied together. You can't have a school if you don't have residents. You can't have residents if you don't have houses. You can't have houses if you don't have businesses. ... It's all tied together. It's all woven together. I mentioned Howard Kennedy earlier, except by a different name. Does anybody know the original name, or did you hear that part? Omaha. So Omaha Heights was up and became Belvedere. Omaha View was over on Miami at 31st. It was a 8-room brick building. I'm going to show you what happened to those bricks by the end of this. Howard Kennedy became one of the segregated schools, and it had a little tiny interesting history in between. We'll get to that in a minute. Then there's this little joint.
Whoa.
Any non-former OPS employees here know the original name of McMillan Middle School? What was it originally called?
Junior high.
It was called a junior high, but it had a different first name. And it wasn't George. It was originally called the North Side Junior High. That's what the plans were made for in 1956. North Side Junior High. They renamed it after a guy. Who is this? McMillan? He was the principal at North, the longtime principal at North, very popular guy. And they named the new school after him. And I was in a great play with it. Oh, it's in a mime show there too. It was great. You might check it out someday. It's on videotape at my house. All right. Now, for those of you who are too young to know, videotapes were this blocky plastic. No, wait, what does this, what? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to 2 things. One that was never happened and one that kind of happened just for a hot minute. Howard Kennedy Junior High. If you drive by Howard Kennedy this afternoon, go up 30th and check out Howard Kennedy. You'll see this funny little addition. It was built to become Howard Kennedy Junior High in 1956. The first junior high in Omaha, does anybody know this? Bonus points. Was Monroe. The second one planned was going to be, actually, there's an older one. And Monroe would be mad if I told him, I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna take me a minute to get there. But they tried, they thought about putting one here at Howard Kennedy in the fifties, didn't work. They decided not to do it and they've used it for the school ever since. There's some crowding problems in North Omaha because they didn't want to put new schools in. And then they were forced to by levies and whatnot. And another idea was Druid Hill Junior High. And again, there's the original Druid Hill, this building you can drive by and see right now. Because it was going to be a junior high. They didn't open it ever. But then they did build these suckers. 1923, Tech High at 30th and Coming. Largest high school west of Mississippi for a hot minute. 4 stories. Does anybody know the secret of what's that? Oh, please. 5 stories. Well, the penthouse suite. I forgot about that. The funny little pergola on top that had stuff. Right?
Actually, they counted the basement as first floor. When you entered on off of Coming, you entered on second floor.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, you could enter on 3 different floors. If you go around to 33rd and entered the tech wings, the technical classrooms, that you could enter, and that was actually 3rd floor.
Very big school. And at its peak, Tech had a huge population. I can't remember the number that it peaked out at. 3,000.
3,000.
Yeah. Very,
Wow.
very large school.
Yes.
So interesting thing today, we all know Tech as
Oh, Tech.
Tech. But did you know that there are several schools located inside of Tech? Right now, it is not devoid of students. There are 800 students who go to school there every day. Yeah,
What?
it's a busy place. And then there's this little joint. It was in some other town. I barely even know the name of it. Whatever that place was. Bunnies. See, I can't make that joke anywhere else in the country. My people. And then this little shack. Now, interesting story about this one. North loves to tell its story. It's so happy with itself about its story, but they started the wrong way. It always starts with, one day we built a school at 36 and Ames. But that didn't happen. One day they tried to build a building at 31st and Ames. Another day they tried to build at 33rd and Ames. And once they originally talked about building at 24th and Meredith.
Whoa.
There's the incredible rotating school site because the school district couldn't afford this one. This one had water underneath it. It was a whole thing. Oh, speaking of water, I forgot this part. Fun fact about Tech High. It sits on top of, go ahead.
Natural spring.
Dun, dun, dun. There's a creek underneath Tech High, a spring that still spouts water. Some people will tell you that they've seen it with their own eyes. There you go.
Did you see it in
Dun, dun, dun.
And the football field is one of the first
Teachers.
city dumps.
So right here on the corner of 30th and Tech, I'm sorry, 30th and Coming, there was a giant football field. Today it's a parking lot. And it was the first city dump, and I have photos of that on NorthOmahaHistory.com. By the way, I have articles about a couple dozen of these schools on North Omaha history. So if you want more on any individual building, just give it a Google. And if it's not there, send me a note, and I might look it up and write about it.
It's going crazy. I want like these little, okay, I need.
Of course you did. This is my friend Michaela. She is my co-investigator for NorthOmahaHistory.com. She's taken a lot of pictures for me. She's an awesome human being. She's also a history nerd. She's fun. Lots of you are, though. And one of the things that we don't really recognize sometimes are the number of private schools that have existed in North Omaha. Now, by private, I also mean parochial. I also mean our religious schools, but everything that's not public, I just kind of throw in this bucket. Now, the reality that I know is that of these 30-some schools, there's another 30 that aren't up here. I can't track the number of Lutheran schools that there were at one point. No joke. There were a lot of Lutheran schools, full-time K-6 Lutheran schools in North Omaha. I can't find all that stuff. So I'm talking about Lutheran homies out there, hook me up. No pressure. But the Catholics help me. But the point is that even the Archdiocese has lost history of some of their schools in North Omaha. They don't tell the story of their own St. Benedict School down at 24th and Grant. For a long time, it was thought of as the only segregated school in Omaha because it was built for Black students to attend, and white students were literally unaccepted there because it was a Black congregation with a Black priest. The first ever black priest in Omaha came from Boys Town and went to work at St. Benedict. However, they shut it down. It became the Bryant Center. Bonus points. Anybody know who the Bryant Center was named for?
William Jennings.
Nope.
No.
Anybody else? A man named George Bryant, who is the leader of a band called the Dan Dizdoods Band after Dan died.
Oh,
But total neighborhood hero, and he was really thought of really highly, so they named the community center after him. But the point is, the building's still standing there. The archdiocese doesn't talk about it. But they don't talk about a lot of these. The St. Catherine's Academy was one of the first Catholic schools in Omaha. Now, it was located more downtown. We wouldn't really think of it as North Omaha, but I include it because it's north of Dodge. And then, of course, you have the whole relationship between Notre Dame, Dominican, Rummel, and all of them filed into Roncalli eventually. And there's all that. Let's look at some pictures.
Brownell Talbot. There's still a Brownell Talbot open, right?
Does it matter to me? Pay attention anymore. It's not.
70 seconds. Yes, he did. 70 seconds. It's north of Dodge.
You move out of North Omaha and elected guys. All right, so I will say this, and to be honest, though, I will say this to be honest and fair. Someday, I will write the history of Fair Acres, and they're not going to like what I write. You know, you gotta be real,
yeah.
and it goes on.
Well, there's one that I'm not seeing on the list with his Jesuit middle school.
Yeah, no, como say Jesuit Middle School. So I gotta get that. Thank you. Yeah. Anything else that's missing off the top of your heads? Go, Joe.
In the public, did you cover Yates? And in this one, do you cover Mercy here?
We're gonna get into the closed schools in just a minute.
All right.
Mercy
Yes, south.
is south. It doesn't count.
All right.
Yeah, we're on board now. No other Omaha. North Omaha. That's all right, man. I'm just joking. Any other thoughts right here? All right, let's keep going. I mentioned earlier Omaha View School. I was at 31st in Miami. Eventually, they closed that school. They wrecked the building, and they moved those students down to Howard Kennedy at 30th and Work, right about. That whole area has a little fascinating history, but I won't go down that rabbit hole. But they reused the bricks, and they reused the bricks, and they moved them to this building at 22nd and Nicholas. It was 2024, but it was at 22nd was across the street, and it was a warehouse for the Board of Education. And this is where they stored books.
That is
And,
so cool.
say that again.
Have they torn it down?
It's gone.
Yeah.
2018.
Recently.
We don't like history here, you know.
Now be careful. We love it. Your own special way. I put this one together just for us today. A list of closed public schools. RIP. All of them. Those are the years that they opened and closed. Yates, 1915 to 1999. Their campaign, their neighborhood campaign, saved that building. We don't save schools in North Omaha.
Did you put in the one that replaced Yates? No.
Which was the one that replaced the
Right
Yates?
across the street from the TAC building, I can't see the name of it right now.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody?
The new one. I
Oh.
can't think of it.
Great, so it replaced Yates, it's new,
Yeah.
right across the street. Let's get that.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there.
It's on Bird.
All right, what else comes to mind when you see this?
Where was the school in Fort Omaha?
Where was this school? The Fort Omaha School. Fort Omaha School from 1889 to 1896. There was a Fort Omaha School that was run by the Omaha Public Schools, by the school district.
Oh, wow.
And it was literally built for those kids who were the children of the officers and soldiers at the fort. However, those kids lived in a neighborhood that was just emerging. And that neighborhood was called Miller Park. We call it Miller Park. They called it by their subdivision names, and there was like 30 subdivisions in the Miller Park neighborhood, including Belle Isle.
Is there any picture of that school?
There is no picture of that school that I can find yet, but you're gonna go find it, so no pressure. But remember, they eventually closed up Fort Omaha School.
Was it
And-
in the Fort Omaha area?
It was right, thank you, it was right on the corner of 30th and Fort, on the southeast corner where Popeyes is.
Oh, okay.
Across the street from it where Mr. C's was. During this time period was the Anheuser-Busch Beer Garden.
Yes.
And it was not a bar. Check this out. It was crazy. For several years in a row, they operated their own park on that corner, on the northeast corner of 30th and 4th. The Anheuser-Busch Beer Garden. They brought the beer up from the Anheuser-Busch factory downtown to this garden, and it was a park. And you could have your own picnic there. You could rent it. Outdoors, grass, hills, trees. Weird. Now, eventually, they put a nice little drive in there called Marshall's. And then they built on the corner, the Post Pharmacy. And next to that, eventually was a laundromat and all kinds of things, but, Lane Drugs, don't forget that. At 30th and 4th, in addition to their 2 other locations, convenient locations in North Omaha. But you have all these other spaces. The 4th Street Special School for Incorrigible Boys was at 30th and Brown. So just a couple blocks away from the old site of Port Omaha School. Florence High School. None of you graduated from there, don't say that. But it was a hot minute that Florence High School operated from 91 to 27. 1891 to 1927. Now here's the secret. They gave out diplomas that said Florence High School, but it was within the building. So that old building that we saw for Florence Elementary also housed Florence High School. But they were very proud of themselves for having their own high school. High schools are a movement. Don't know if you know that. The Omaha High School was where oh man, I missed this whole part. We're almost done. Almost all of those old schools went grades 1 through 8. And when you got to 8, you're done.
What?
Unless you were really smart and could pay a little bit of tuition. Then you got to go to Omaha High School. And that was fancy pants. The first African-American graduates from Omaha High School came in 1878. It was a young man whose last name was Curry, Henry Curry. His father, Richard Curry, was a black activist who changed Omaha dramatically, but that's a whole nother story. Omaha High School was fancy pants, so you were somebody special. If you graduated from Omaha High School before 1910, 1915. And then it got way too packed, and they decided this radical idea. We're gonna have to bump this out. Let's build some more high schools. Commercial high rows, tech high rows, south high rows, and eventually they started talking about high school in the near north side. Oh wait, did I say that out loud? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, they wanted to build a high school in the Koontz Place neighborhood originally in 1912. They talked about putting it where Koontz Park is today. Didn't work, they didn't do it. So then they started talking about putting it at 24th and Ames. And then they started, or 24th Americans. And then they started talking about putting it at 31st and Ames. And eventually the plan moved up the hill because there's too much water at the bottom, yada, yada. Nebraska School for the Deaf? Please. Pershing School. Who left that off the list? You saw the picture earlier, though.
I don't see Pershing.
Well, I left it off this list. I see that. So Pershing School was down in the town of East Omaha. For those of you who don't know, once upon a time, there was a school east of Abbott Drive, west of the river, south of the airport.
Wow.
It was called Pershing School. It was kindergarten through 8th grade. It was a beautiful school that served real human beings. Oh, there was a town right there too. That had